This is actually quite exciting, seeing how the number of participants climb and climb and climb, unlike my investment portfolio.
Them, you're live.
I know. Well, I'm trying to entertain the people who are on time. Well, we're waiting for everybody to join. We're on 44 already. I might just mention that we've got a very varied audience today, for which we are very thankful, from the private sector, the public sector, research institutions, academia, local, regional, and international companies and institutions. So that's really good stuff. Adolf, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Ah, you've been answered. Okay, I think we should start in honor of those people who are on time and who didn't have any problems with connecting. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Wim de Tooy. I'm the secretary to CIOPA, and I'm very honored to welcome you. Just briefly, a couple of house rules. Please remember to mute your microphone and switch off your camera. That is, if you have the facility to do so. Should you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section. You'll see the button bar at the bottom of your screen. Please post your questions in the question and answer section. And should the presenters be unable to answer your questions towards the end of the session, they will do so by email afterwards. The presentations will be uploaded on CIOPA's website in due course, should you wish to view any of those again. The formalities being done with, it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for the session, Dr. Ron Josias. Dr. Ron has been employed by the South African National Accreditation System, or SANAS, for more than 23 years, the last 12 of which as CEO. He currently is the chairperson of the African Accreditation Cooperation, or AFRAC as it is more commonly known, and he also held the position of treasurer for the global body responsible for accreditation, ILAC, and the regional coordinator on matters of accreditation for SADC. He is therefore eminently qualified to lead us on the topic of demystifying the South African quality infrastructure's role in facilitating trade. Dr. Ron. Ron, you're muted.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining in. Just want to make sure you can all see the presentation that I've projected right now. Wim, can you confirm that?
Confirmed.
Thank you very much. So welcome to this webinar session, and thank you very much for that introduction, Wim. We will be looking today, focusing this webinar very specifically on the essential and vegetable oils industry. Very important industry for all of us. And more specifically, we're going to be looking at the role of the South African Quality Infrastructure Institution in supporting market access for the essential oils and vegetable oils. Now, if we look at the essential and vegetable oils industry, it's quite an important industry. It covers South Africa, for instance, is home to about 21,000 plant species. And we got a unique fauna and fynbos industry, and we are the third most biologically diverse country in the world. We have potential to export essential and vegetable oils. Market projections, for instance, says that by 2027, the market value would be about $33 billion, which is an increase annually from 2020 onwards to now about 7.5% annually. But to do that, we do have quite a few challenges. One of the challenges that's been identified by quite a few people is the issue of the product quality, our essential oils quality and the consistency of that quality. And therefore, today we're looking at very specifically at how do we address this challenge of the consistency and the quality of essential oils, and what is the role that the quality infrastructure institutions can play. Now, when I talk about the quality infrastructure institutions, we're talking very specifically about the South African standards body, which is SAPS, the SAPS, as we all would know them. We talk very specifically about the NMISA, which is our National Metrology Institute of South Africa, which is the body that makes sure that we have our national standards in terms of mass, length, volume, etc. So if we say today we export 6 tons of essential oil in weighed in South Africa, it should be 6 tons in Europe, it should be 6 tons in the US, or wherever we export. And then NMISA is the custodian of our national metrology standards, measurement standards as such. And then we have the SANAS, the South African National Accreditation System, which is responsible for accreditation and accrediting those conformity assessment bodies such as inspection, certification, bodies and testing laboratories, all kinds of laboratories, medical laboratories. SANAS makes sure that those bodies are competent to do those work. And lastly, in the chain of the quality infrastructure in South Africa is the NRCS, National Regulator for Compulsory Specification, an extremely important body looking at compulsory specifications, market surveillance as well. So we will be focusing on that, and our webinar series focus on 3 key sessions that we would run out over the next 3 days. All sessions will be more or less at this time. Within that, we were going to be looking very specifically at the role of the quality infrastructure in South Africa and demystifying. So the first session would be really about demystifying the accreditation standards, metrology roles as part of the quality infrastructure of South Africa. And we will look at that very specifically as we go along through the next 3 sessions in the value chain of the essential and vegetable oils, from seed selection right down to the actual application of that in foreign markets, in our industries as well, in our food, wherever we use these essential oils. So we'll be looking at that. How does the quality infrastructure and the quality infrastructure institutions impact on the exports? Our second series really focus on the essential oils and vegetable oils value chain, right down from climate, right down to going down to the soil selection, the seed selection, cultivation, the processing, bottling, transportation, and eventually up to our consumers and our buyers as such. So we have quite a few interesting presentations coming up from industry leaders, and we're so grateful that they have actually agreed to participate in this. We have from the big organizations to the small ones. We have from wild harvesting to cultivated crops as well. So it's going to be quite an interesting session, the second session as well. And lastly, our last session, which will be on Thursday, would really deal with the challenges and opportunities. Here we see actually quite a few interesting lessons that most of the farmers, the buyers and the producers have learned as they have implemented and have started to export a lot of these oils, and they want to share that knowledge they have with all of us. So I hope on Thursday we will be able to talk to specifically new entrants and those experienced farmers as well, that we can learn from each other as we make sure that we can actually capitalize on this big opportunity that we have in South Africa for growth and for making sure that we can actually advance our economy. So just a few administrative issues, as Wim already alluded to. We will be gathering some information through the tools that we'll be using. So after the second presentation, there will be just 2 small questions that you will be able to answer online, and we hope to get your feedback from that. Then at the end of the session, we will just basically run a poll just to gauge and get feedback in terms of how it went. This is a very interesting one, this webinar series, because it's the first webinar series we ran as a blended webinar series. And basically what that means is that part of this, in fact, all of the interviews or all of the presentations are pre-recorded, and the live part is that most of the people who will be presenting are with us here today. And so you might have an opportunity, if time permitted, you'll have an opportunity to basically engage with them and ask questions, and hopefully they will be able to respond to those questions as well. If we don't have enough time, I would ask that you use the question and answer box area, post your questions in there, and we will hopefully get back to you with some answers that you would need. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the various speakers. I will introduce all the speakers now, and then hopefully I won't repeat all of that at the beginning of each presentation. We are grateful for all the speakers in this session. We will dealing specifically with demystifying the South African quality infrastructure. And for that, we have actually gathered the big brains in this industry on quality infrastructure to actually present to us, give us an understanding of what is the South African quality infrastructure and how they engage and how can they assist the essential and vegetable oils industry, as well as facilitating the trade. So we have as our first speaker, Dr. Bassoon from the SABS. Dr. Bassoon has over 18 years experience in standards development, research, and international liaison. He is one of those quiet brains, very influential. He is only one of 2 persons on the continent, the African continent, that serves on the council of the ISO Council, the International Standards Organization, and he also serves on the council of the African Regional Accreditation, Standards Association also. He served in SABS in various positions, from being the executive in enterprise development, training, risk management, and being back at standards development. He's at the head of all the standards developments within the SABS. He also doctorate in technology and biotechnology specifically, and an MSc in biotechnology, as well as a BSc honors. We honored when I asked him if we could actually record him, that he can be part of this webinar. His passion for this industry is so great that he actually said, if you want at any time, you can even come back again. Thank you. Our second speaker, and I think most of you probably know him already, he's Dr. or Mr. Nmakulu Makufi. He is the CEO of Nemisa. Mr. Mkufi have various experiences, and very specifically in this area that we're talking about now, the essential oils. He has served as the CEO of the South African Essential Oils Business Incubator, as General Manager for the Innovation Hub. He's got his own farm as well. He is the Managing Director of Agro-Processing Essential Oils. And in 2013, he was appointed as the CEO of Nemisa, the position he still currently holds. So he's got that blended experience. He knows what you're going through. He understands what the industry is about, but he also understands what the quality infrastructure and the importance of the quality infrastructure is about. So we're looking forward to his presentation. The third speaker is Mr. Paulani. He's the executive in accreditation. Mpo is an old friend of mine. We've been working together for many years. He's been with SANAS, the South African National Accreditation System, for about 18 years. He started his career as an inspector for pressurized equipment as a mechanical engineer with Pambili Mertz, and he joined SANAS in 2003. Mpo has a National High Diploma in Mechanical Engineering, and he's also got a master's degree in engineering. Our last presenter is Mr. Chepo Modiba. He's been with the SABS and then moved later on to the NRTS. He's been in this business for 21 years. He understands the legal metrology issues quite well, currently acting general manager. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Law, a Bachelor of Commerce in Internal Auditing. He's also got an engineering qualification in electrical engineering, and he has also studied at UNISA and TQM Total Quality Management, and he's also got a diploma in professional management, a professional management program as such. These are our presenters, and I'm grateful that they were actually have made themselves available to share their knowledge and understanding of our quality infrastructure. So we're looking forward to their presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the first speaker, to Dr. Bassoon, to be played. Thank you. Nora.
The South African Bureau of Standards has been in existence for 75 years. Actually, this year is the 76th year. We celebrated our 75th anniversary last year. So it goes back, several decades, providing standards, quality assurance services over the number of decades. And basically, it has a legislated mandate. It's mandated by legislation, which is the Standards Act, and it's been revised on numerous occasions. The latest Standards Act is the Act of 2008. And that act is governed by the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. And it specifically identifies the SABS, or mandates the SABS, to develop, promote, and maintain South African national standards, as well as promote quality amongst products, services for domestic and export markets. And lastly, not forgetting a provision of conformity assessment services. The type of conformity assessments that the SABS provides includes testing services, certification services, inspection services, verification services, and not so much to the extent of conformity, but training services as well. So these all complement the standards division in terms of developing standards, because the conformity assessments are aligned to the standards that we developed. So standards play a very important role in facilitating trade. I think there's a statistic that shows that 98% of goods that are moved throughout the world are dependent on standards. And that's how critical standards are. Standards, they play an important role in the sense that they actually define specific requirements. And these are basically minimum requirements. Either could be specifications, they could be guidelines, they could be characteristics of products and processes. And these are fundamentally the pillars of ensuring that a product or a service is fit for purpose and allowing these products to move across borders and even domestically as well. So it gives a level of confidence that a product or a service is one of trust, and one that basically the consumer or the procurer can trust in terms of health and safety and quality of the products. Standards create those opportunities for these products to be exported. How this happens is that if a farmer, as an example, needs to understand what the requirements of a standard is. It either could be a process, it could be a product-related standard, whatever the standard is, the farmer needs to understand these requirements and meet these requirements for not only domestic production, but also for export purposes as well. But that's the first point, just meeting the standard. Getting access to the standard, meeting the standard, producing, manufacturing, and adhering to the standard. Now, you require a further additional confidence in that products require, to a fair share, a level of certification, of test reports, validation, and this is where conformity assessments come in. So a farmer, upon meeting a standard requirement, has to go further, because for export purposes and to allow for easy goods and services to be moved and across borders, certificates which are recognized regionally, globally, will suffice in the export of products. So you want to make sure as a farmer that you meet export requirements, which could require certification of your product, could be a system certification or a product certification. But more importantly, in these, there are certain products as well that have regulatory requirements. And the farmer needs to also be aware of what these regulatory requirements are, and ensure that he or she complies with the regulatory requirements, that these products can easily meet these requirements for export purposes, and there's no comebacks or rejection of your products purely because certain elements of not meeting regulatory requirements. And sometimes these things can become technical barriers to trade, certain regulations, because regulations are dependent on a particular country's requirements. Standards will basically provide the knowledge, and this knowledge is basically documented as a consensus document, and standards are applicable to everyone based on who wants to use them, based on the scope, etc. And it's important to understand that standards are for voluntary application, as opposed to a regulation, which is a mandatory requirement. And as a national standards body, the SABS in the standards division will develop standards, South African national standards, and will make them available to a regulator based on their scope of regulations to reference a particular standard, and based on its reference, it can become a mandatory requirement. So we work very closely and try and ensure that regulators play an important role in looking at standards as possible solutions to achieve their regulatory objectives. But suffice to say, standards that are developed by a national standards body are not regulations. There's a distinction between, as we say, voluntary standards and standards to be regulated. Standards, when developed, majority of the standards makers in our technical committees are industry themselves. They want to use those standards to allow for accessibility of their products and services into the marketplace. So a regulation will come in when there is an identification by an authority, and the authority in most cases is the policymaker, is government, is a regulatory authority. Within their scope, they identify that there is probably a market failure on a particular product or a service. They go through their processes of understanding the implications of this market failure, and especially this market failure will come substantially from safeguarding the interests of the consumer in terms of health and safety and environmental protection. So there's a process that the regulator will go through in terms of analysis of the market failure, the recourse that needs to be put in terms of addressing that market failure and making something mandatory as a requirement. And so it's up to the regulators, not a national standards body, which is not in their purview, to develop regulations. So regulators might go through a similar process of consultation, stakeholder engagement, understanding the market failure, and recommending. In most cases, what we would like to do is for regulators to recommend and reference a national standard or an international standard to be part of a regulatory outcome or an objective to achieve their regulatory outcomes or a policy objective. So it's a different body. It's not a national standards body. We do understand that there are certain national standards bodies that are underdeveloped, developing, that might have two separate mandates within an institution. But as national standards bodies mature and conform to the maturing quality infrastructure frameworks, regulatory mandates certainly come out of a national standards body's mandate. Product standards relate specifically to a characteristic or performance requirement of a particular product. And therefore the difference with a process standard is basically the how, what needs to happen as part of activities that a manufacturer or a service provider needs to go through. And that relates to a process. Now, interrelated processes results in a system, and therefore we have a number of management system standards. Typical example is the ISO 9001, the most well-known standard, most well-known management system standard, which is the QMS, ISO 9001, and that relates to a system, and that relates to interrelated processes. So it does, a process standard does not necessarily confirm that a product meets a particular specification, characteristic, or requirement. You might have a product-related standard which a manufacturer or a farmer needs to adhere to, as opposed to a process standard which has different requirements that the manufacturer or a farmer needs to meet. They can be interdependent, and they can have mutual requirements or exclusive requirements depending on the markets that you want to access. So as an example, if you want to access a market that requires a scheme which is system certification, they might say that the requirement is that you need to be FFSC compliant, which is system certification. On the other hand, another market might say, I need a standard against this particular product. And an example could be, we just recently published a standard on essential oils, which is essential oil for geranium, that gives you very clear specifications on the color, the chromatography characteristics, etc., that the product needs to meet. So different requirements, but they're two very different requirements in terms of market access. There is a place in the market for private standards bodies, but we need to understand that these private setting bodies develop standards for a particular niche market, for a particular intention in the marketplace. They are not national standards. So you can get a few institutions together or companies together that work around developing a private specification, and that revolves around access to a particular market or export market, etc. But the difference herein lies the consensus, openness, transparency, coherent process of developing a national standard. That is international best practice, that is national best practice. And that's why a national standards body like the SABS, and there's only one, ideally should be one national standards body in every country that develops national standards. So there is a place for private sector bodies to work and develop standards. Ideally, we would like those standards to come through a process through to the national standards body like the SABS, and develop that as a base document for a national standard. And that allows an equal footing, a level playing field of every stakeholder who wants to get access into that market, having the opportunity for using the standard, uptaking the standard, implementing the standard, and equal access to marketplace opportunities as part of a national standard. We are members of ISO and have been and continue to be a founding member of ISO, including IEC as well. Now, there's certain obligations as becoming a member of ISO. We have the opportunity to influence the development of international standards. We participate as P members or O members at ISO, and we influence the development of those standards. In addition to that, we have accessibility of ISO standards because we could use them and adopt them as South African national standards as well. We can adopt them identically. Ideally, this is what we would like to achieve. But where there's peculiarities and subtle changes regarding certain things like geographical differences, climatic differences, technological differences, etc., we can adopt these standards with modifications. And that's the structure of ISO. We have international state-of-the-art best practice solutions that we could use in South Africa, and it allows for us to export our products out as part of our industrialization ambitions as well, out of the country through the globe, throughout the world. ARSO, on the other hand, is the regional standards bodies. ARSO has a direct impact or plays a direct role on the intercontinental free trade area. And they are ultimately responsible for harmonization of standards within the various national standards bodies in the continent, which will result in an ARS standard, African Regional Standard, which is a harmonized standard. And this harmonized standard text solution allows for easy movement of goods and services within the African continent. So it plays a pivotal role in advancing the African continental free trade area, which has recently been launched, and I think is moving ahead with steam in terms of getting all the countries together, working together, harmonizing standards amongst other things as well, but harmonizing standards which allow for an increased amount of intra-regional trade. The export market on any product and service, so let's take essential oils from this perspective, is that you need to understand what the market requirements are locally and what the market requirements are for export opportunities. For export opportunities, ideally, you should be looking at standards, and the first point of entry would be available. That is ideally an adoption of the international market that you seek to get into. So it most likely will be an ISO standard. So the first point of entry is go and do some research in terms of the standards. Firstly, the products that you have and under development and production. Is there a national standard to it? Is there an international standard to it? And have SABS adopted the international standard? And having that access to that standard, you need to look at the requirements of that standard. Now, the standard might be twofold, as we pointed out. It could be a product-related standard, or it could be a system-related standard. And you need to look at both, because different markets require different certifications or different requirements to meet the accessibility of your product into that market. So look at both process, product, and maybe system as well. And start developing. The ideal thing is you want to look at a system. And most of the cases, system standards provide the opportunity for farmers to enter international markets. It could be ISO 9000, it could be HACCP, it could be FFSC. Try to articulate a methodology of aligning your processes and procedures towards an international standard. So research, access to that standard through the SABS. Once you've done that, the next step is you may require, and in most cases, some degree of third-party validation that you are meeting the requirements of the standard. And this will be either a test report from an accredited independent test laboratory, or it could be a certificate from an independent third-party certification body, or it could be an inspection body. But you need to understand what the different markets require in terms of certification schemes, and then start working with a certification body to meet those requirements and getting certified, or directly, if it requires a test report only, then you could submit samples to a test house that will be able to provide you with an independent test report to validate your product meeting that requirement. Having that, so you've got your standard, you've met the requirements, you implemented systems, processes, you met the requirements, and you've got validations, and then you start making applications to the respective markets. And obviously from then the demand requires that customs, excise, SARS, and various levels of other things outside of a quality assurance comes in terms of import-export requirements. So that's basically from a quality infrastructure perspective in terms of what needs to happen to support a farmer for export requirements. There are regulations. I think in these particular products as well, there will be regulations, and you need to clearly understand what the regulatory requirements are, and hopefully the regulatory authorities locally as well could assist you, because there could be elements of mutual recognition of conformity assessments, mutual recognition of regulations as well, that could support your penetration of the product into an export market and allow that as an easier process.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that presentation. I hope you have captured most of the key issues that the presentation wanted to bring through. One, specifically the differences between a standard and a technical regulations, the different type of standards that we do have. There is, as he highlighted as well, there is a space for private standards, which we also see within this industry. I've noted as well some of the comments that have been made, and thank you very much for that. I think it's quite important to understand that standards, may that be national standards, international standards, or even private standards, is becoming more and more demand for export into the international market, and specifically international standards and national standards, which is normally adopted, or the international standards adopted within the national context, becomes quite important for us to make sure that we meet our customers' requirements. And yes, our customers normally say, this is the standard that we want you to comply with. And those standards would normally be based on international standards, or even national standards or regional standards as such. So thank you very much for that. Our second speaker will be from NMISA, our National Metrology Institute of South Africa, Mr. Mkufi. He will talk about the role of the National Metrology Institute of South Africa in facilitating trade, and the role specifically of metrology in facilitating trade. Thank you.
NMISA, as an entity of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, gets its mandate from the Measurement Units and Measurement Standard Act number 18 of 2006, which was enacted in essence to establish the National Metrology Institute of South Africa to be the custodian of the national measurement standards, to develop, keep and maintain the national measurement standards of units, to ensure that the application of the International System of Units, the SI, in South Africa is at a level where it is comparable with the international system. Metrology Institute, in a few areas, I can say threefold. First, to ensure that develops, keeps and maintain the national measurement standards for quantities that are measured in the country. Secondly, it represents the country internationally in relation to the National Metrology Institutes of other countries. In our current system with the Meter Convention, within the BIPM, the National Metrology Institute becomes a representative of the country that ensures that standards of the country are comparable to the measurement standards of other countries, thus forming a base of the quality infrastructure that ensures acceptability, testing or measurement certificates that are issued by a specific country. In this case, South Africa, our measurement certificates, our testing certificates are accepted internationally because of the accreditation that we have, but that is on the basis of the national measurement standards that are realized and then disseminated to the measuring industries by the National Metrology. For one to be competitive in trading, one has to demonstrate and prove that their products are of good quality. There is standards that have been set as minimum requirements. So the proving of compliance to those minimum standards by the products requires measurements, which the National Metrology Institute plays in that space. First, as I indicated, ensuring that our measurement standards, to which the measurements that are done by industry have to be traceable, those are comparable. So the measurement standards are internationally comparable with the standards of the international system, that is of other countries. As we talk about measurement standards, it is a common occurrence that people would confuse it with paper standards. Yes, paper standards would refer to the scientific standards. So the measurement standards that I'm referring to are the scientific standards, the measurement units, like, for example, the kilogram itself or the meter itself. Those are the measurement standards that I'm talking about, where the National Metrology Institute concerns itself with the realization of those measurement standards and then disseminating them to those that use those standards in industry. The National Metrology Institute of South Africa, or any other measurement institute in the world for that matter, maintains or builds the confidence in their measurements is through participation in the international system. There are areas where we compare the national measurement standards of the different countries, and basically the role of the International Bureau of Weights and Measures that is mandated by the Meter Convention is actually to ensure the organization of those inter-comparisons of the national measurement standards of the different countries. So participation in that international system. And as the National Metrology Institute of South Africa, we do participate fully in that international system. And then we organize our regional system that builds up from the sub-region to the continent in the form of SADC-MET in the sub-region and AfriMETs in the continent, and eventually participating in the BIPM systems. Just for your information, NIMISA as an institution, we participate in all 10 of the consultative committees of the BIPM to ensure that all measurements that are performed in the country are compared with measurement capabilities of the rest of the world. And that intercomparison is the one that gives us that confidence that we are comparable and competitive in our measurements. Our role in the protection of health and safety and the environment can be summarized as follows. In most cases, the goods that are traded would have an impact on health and safety and the environment. So part of the measurements that gets done, or the testing, if I may use a layman's terms, part of the testing that gets done is to ensure or assure the safety of the products that are to be used in the industry. So those measurement standards that we develop, those measurement standards that we disseminate to industry are actually ensuring that when they get applied in testing that relates to health, safety, and the environment, they are comparable, and as a result assures the safety of the end user at the end of the day. In terms of health, there is direct requirements for equipment that are used in the medical field for them to be calibrated. There is, as an example, a direct requirement, if I may use an example of oxygen, because we are now in a serious COVID-19 pandemic. The need for oxygen has become very pronounced. And you might go pick up any oxygen and give it to a patient, and only to find that it is impure or it is of a bad quality that might actually cause death as opposed to helping the patients recover. So we as a Metrology Institute provide the purified reference gas mixtures, which are the reference materials that are used by the medical industry to test for the purity and the safety of the gas oxygen that is to be used in industry. So those are but a few examples of how we as a metrology institute, as the base of the quality infrastructure, assures the health, safety, and environmental protection. At the highest level of realizing the measurement standards using scientific methods and then maintaining those standards and disseminating them to the users is scientific metrology. So scientific metrology concerns itself with the development and realization of the measurement standards, and that international comparison that I was referring to. Then at the application of those measurement standards, usually it's in industry where there is production, where there is manufacturing, where there is testing for the quality of equipment, and even at academic research for developing new methods and equipments, is industrial metrology, which concerns with itself with ensuring that the measuring equipment that are used in industry are calibrated and traceable to the national measurement standards, or to the measurement standards that are developed at the scientific metrology level. Then when you level, which is the legal metrology, concerns itself measurements where there is a influence on trade, more especially, and where that trade, as I indicated, health, safety, and so on, gets raised as a risk once you start trading in goods and services. So where the measurements, then that's the area of metrology that we call legal metrology. As I say, it is a continuum that operates as a full system of metrology that assures that the quality infrastructure for ensuring the protection of the population, the health and safety thereof, and protecting the environment, and ensuring trade is fair. As I indicated earlier, in the cases where measurements have to do with the fairness of trade, that's what we then put that level of metrology as legal metrology. So there's no difference per se, but it is a continuum starting from the realization to the application to ensure health, safety, and protection of the environment at the other end. For us to be able to effectively provide our service as mandated by the Act, it is an imperative that we must develop and keep and maintain relationships with different stakeholders. Just starting from the Quality Infrastructure Institute, what we in South Africa call the technical infrastructure, which includes the South African Bureau of Standards for Documentary Standards, as I referred to earlier on, the National Regulator for Compulsory Specification, who look at legal metrology and other applications of regulations. And then we have SANAS, who looks at accreditation as part of the ILEC system of accreditation for South Africa. So we engage with those, but I want to indicate that when it comes to regulators, it is not only the NRCS that we engage with. We keep relationships with other regulators in different sectors. Then in the region, we then have a system that we call SADC-MET, which is part of the SADC quality infrastructure setup, where we were part of the founding members of or that helped in establishing SADC-MET. Then that group later into what is now called AfriMET, the Africa Metrology System, which includes both legal and scientific. So in the continent, then we have a structure that is pulling together the quality infrastructure entities or bodies for the continent into what is now called the Pan-African Quality Infrastructure that helps the quality infrastructure entities engage better with continental bodies such as the African Union and other related entities. So we as an NMI keep relationships and maintain them with all those stakeholders. For closing, I must say it is very important that we continue to recognize and realize the value of a quality infrastructure in an economy. If now we are looking at post-COVID rebuilding of our economy, and it is only with competitive products that we will be able to build a strong, sustainable industry. And for that, we need a very well-resourced quality infrastructure. To rebuild our economy, we should go back to the base, start at the base of the economy, which is the quality infrastructure that involves measurement and testing and proving the quality and safety of the products that we are taking into the industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation as well. You know, I'm sitting here and I feel actually a little bit lonely because I can't see any of you. And therefore, what we're going to do now is we're going to run a short little just questionnaire, just 2 questions that you can actually just answer for us. So I just want to make sure that you're all still there and that we're not presenting to ourselves. Okay. So I would just ask that we just pose those 2 questions. Thank you. I'll give you 2 minutes for that. So online, you will see the questions. You can just basically, touch on that and actually just tick the correct question answer. Thank you. It's coming in nicely. That's good. Okay. Okay. We've got 30 seconds to go. I don't see any more coming in. There's about 28 people who came in, who responded. Okay. So it's about 28 out of 40 people that responded to that. 29 I see now, it's still coming in. Thank you. Answers still coming in. Okay, we're going to close the poll now. Thank you very much. We have about 77% of the people, 31 out of the 40 that participating in this webinar responded to those questions. So thank you very much. Let's quickly see what those answers were. Is there, yeah. We were asking the questions, which of the below comprise of the South African quality infrastructure institutions, and 87% of the people was correct, responded correctly. So thank you very much for that. The second question we asked, which ones of these are mandatory? Is it the compulsory specifications or legal metrology or technical regulations or all of the above? and 58% of the people who responded are correct. It's not that anyone was wrong. In fact, most of them did indicate at least one or two of that, but all three, the above was correct, and therefore 58%. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for participating. So in the previous presentation, which was a very important one, it talks specifically to the role of the National Metrology Institute of South Africa, NMISA. And you know, without NMISA, we would not have been able to log on time today, because they are the custodians of our time. They're custodians of the kilogram, they're custodians of volume, of mass, etc. So you might not see a lot of them, but everything that you do, every measurement that you make is subject to traceability back to the national standards, which is held by the custodians, which is the National Metrology Institute. So we thank them very much for that. We're going to move on to our next presenter, which is from the accreditation side from SANAS, which is Mr. Paulani. Mpo will be presenting on the role of SANAS in an accreditation in trade facilitation. Thank you.
SANAS in particular gets its mandate from Accreditation Act, the full name being the Accreditation for Conformity Assessment, Calibration, and Good Laboratory Practice Act, Act 19 of 2006. The role of a national accreditation body is to ensure that the country has got an authoritative body that looks after accreditation as a non-profit activity. Accreditation by its nature is not for profit, because it is for third-party attestation, which means it is for confirming that those that do certain kinds of work competent to do that. Hence, a national accreditation body is very key in making sure that it plays that oversight role in terms of all the conformity assessment activities within the country. Now, let's talk about the activities of those that we accredit. Let's take it for an example, say a testing laboratory that tests parts that would go into a motor car, as an example, and these components are going to be exported to another country to be put into vehicles. These parts and the testing and the inspection of these parts have to be conducted in an accredited laboratory. So those results are accepted, goes to the other side. Now, I mean, again, if you look at, for instance, an exporter of food or fruits, for instance, if a company or a farmer in South Africa exports fruits to the Netherlands or to the UK, and these fruits need to undergo certain tests as part of their specifications, accreditation plays a role whereby they are tested once and then they are accepted everywhere. So that facilitates trade and that reduces the technical barriers to trade. So the motto for accreditation is tested or inspected or certified once, accepted everywhere. This is how the confidence is built. Number one, as an accreditation body, for you to become part of the global accreditation fraternity, international accreditation cooperation, ILAC, where there are what we call mutual recognition arrangements. So to become party to those mutual recognition arrangements, a national accreditation body would be evaluated in accordance with the international standards, ISO 17011. And that is how, if everything goes well and you pass the evaluation, then the accreditation body becomes party to this international arrangement, mutual recognition arrangement. So basically, these mutual recognition arrangements tell you that this accreditation body or the certificates that are produced by this accredited body can be regarded as equivalent to anywhere in the world. And once you become a signatory to these mutual recognition arrangements, all of your conformity assessment bodies results be accepted as equivalent anywhere in the world. You see, accreditation by its nature is in the voluntary space. ILAC and IAF are voluntary cooperation bodies, and as such, when regulators specify technical regulations, they would specify their local requirements, which are very particular to their country. And in that regard, they may specify that the national accreditation body will take care of the accreditation requirements in that regard. So you might find that although this mutual recognition is accepted everywhere, when it comes to the regulatory environment, regulators tend to specify their local national accreditation body. Let's talk about protecting health, safety, and the environment. That would necessarily be in the regulatory domain. And typically, the regulator would have all their requirements put in place, and they would then say for a body to do business in that specific area, they must be accredited. So basically what they're saying is that they don't want to be doing this work themselves. They're opening it up to other capable operators, but the operators need to prove that they are capable of carrying out this work. And the only way to do that is to put accreditation in the middle, because then with accreditation, we've got all the requirements and all the criteria that goes with the specific field. We agree to that with the regulator, and then we put it in a technical regulatory TR document. So there we would specify the accreditation requirements and also over and above what the regulator needs to look at as well. So it is a synergy whereby we look at the competence, and then the regulator would look at additional requirements that they've put across. We, as an accreditation, we accredit the certification bodies, and they certify their clients. So accreditation is then overseeing of the certification bodies. We are not in competition. We are not doing the same thing. We are looking at the competence of the certification bodies to certify to those various standards against which they must certify. Accreditation is it's sort of a network of all the accreditation bodies, and then this network is pulled together by the regional accreditation body. In the African case, that would be the African Accreditation Cooperation, AFRAC. So all the accreditation bodies in Africa will be affiliated to AFRAC. For an accreditation body to be party to AFRAC, they also need to be peer evaluated by AFRAC. AFRAC would then grant the national accreditation body that status of the mutual recognition arrangement. The AFRAC would look at the continent, and then the ILAC and IAF would look at all the other as a network. So we are all connected together. Each region would have its regional accreditation cooperation. As an accreditation body, we only charge for the service we give with no profit. We are not making any profit whatsoever. So we charge for the service directly without any profit. So as a small farmer, what I would advise you is that you need to look at the volumes. For instance, let's say you are into the fruit business. You need to look at your volumes, and whether it is advisable for you to have your own laboratory or to use the services of an already existing laboratory. So if it makes sense to you to have your own facility, then of course, go ahead. But if you do not have, the muscle, and also not going to get any benefit from having a laboratory, players in the field who can assist you, because the services are there. But if your volumes demand it, then by all means, start looking at having your own accredited facility. And also, you need to look at the regulatory environment in your products that you are dealing with. So standards build confidence for stakeholders, and also they make life simpler for those that use them, and also if applied in a harmonious way, reduce what we call technical barriers to trade. Then look at those standards to say, is this product manufactured in accordance with this standard or specification? So accreditation would then look at competence of those that do the testing or the inspection to say, do they know what they're looking for when they're testing this product according to this particular standard? So the standards are intertwined in accreditation, because the documents that we use are based on standards. Accreditation is based on standards. Technical regulations as well, compare them or put them side by side and say, technical regulations are standards that have been made, mandatory. Technical regulation, because technical regulation is specifically geared to safety of the product that the people are going to be using, and the health of those that will be consuming this product, and also what the manufacturing processes are doing to the environment. So the technical regulations will be specific to how and why. Let's not talk about export for now. Let's say you just want to sell your fruits to Woolworths. You need to know those quality regimes within Woolworths. You need to speak to somebody from Woolworths to say, from the start, even before you even start, how and what do you require from me? Are there any restrictions in terms of GMO or whatnot? So you can't just build something and then try and sell it. You need to know from the scratch, who am I producing this for? What are the initial requirements? And then also, what are the quality requirements for that?
Okay, so thank you very much for that one as well. Mr. Paulani talked about quite a few important things. One specifically is that unbroken chain of trust in the conformity assessment results, on the test results. So when oils, for instance, are getting tested, can the receiving party rely on that results that's produced by a little testing laboratory way down there in Africa? And can we accept that results as such? So through the mutual recognition arrangements, through the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation, through the regional corporations, and then through the accreditation body, and ultimately the conformity assessment body, the laboratories, inspection bodies, provide that unbroken link or chain of trust, where at each stage verification of their competence are ensured through accreditation. So that's important. I think you highlight as well, one of the key issues that's normally a big misunderstanding, the difference between certification and accreditation. So you highlighted that, and the understanding of that is that accreditation basically accredits certification bodies to perform their tasks, and certification body is a conformity assessment body as such. We have now come to the last presentation, and our last presentation is the interesting one as well, because this is the body, the National Regulator for Compulsory Specification, that looks after technical regulations or compulsory specifications, not necessarily of all departments, mostly focusing on Department of Trade and Industries technical regulations, as well as those that influence trade, and also border protections, etc. So they do those kind of inspections together with customs. They do inspections as well as they go out and, for instance, verifying that tonight, if the petrol price goes up today, Are we sure that we're actually getting the amount that we're paying for? And therefore they have, for instance, verification officers that goes around and have bodies that do that verification to make sure that when the price go up and it's R2 a liter, we wish, that you're actually getting R2 worth of that. And if tomorrow it goes up to R3 a liter, that you're actually getting the volumes for your money. So they look after consumer. So I'll introduce as well Mr. Trevor Chepo Modiba. He will be presenting, doing the last presentation in the series. Thank you.
NRCS was a regulatory division of SABS. In 2008, 1st of September, a National Regulatory for Compulsory Specification Act 5 of 2008 was promulgated, giving birth to the National Regulator, which today we call NRCS. So the mandate is derived from the National Regulator for Compulsory Specification. However, it is also important to note that the regulatory division comes with a baby as well called legal metrology. The legal metrology unit within the NRCS derives its mandate from the Legal Metrology Act as well. So by then it was the Trade Metrology Act. In 2014, the Act was reviewed and it is now called the Legal Metrology Act, which is Act 9 of 2014. So we've got those two acts that we mainly get our mandate from. I would say the role of NRCS is the enabler in the economy for the fact that majority of products that are or that NRCS regulates, you're mostly used by your consumers rather than your industry as such. And the reason I'm saying it's an enabler is because of a lot of trading happens with those goods, but also not only trading, the safety plays a critical role, not only of women, also of environment, the health of our environment and of our people in South Africa. We make sure that the NRCS implements compulsory specification or technical regulations in equitable and fair manner across the industries, irrespective of the size and the dominance. We also play a space in fair trading. I think if you have equitable and fair regulation, you end up with fair trade as well. We also conduct how that is done. If you develop regulations, you make sure they're implemented, meaning people undergo same processes that are inspected in a fair and similar manner. But we play a role in majority of industries in South Africa, like your food industry, your legal metrology industry, your automotive and electrotech or electrotechnical. And that is what I'm saying also, we develop regulation based on international requirements. So enabling locally manufactured accessing the international market, also the international market to access the South African market if the regulations are complied. NRCS facilitate trades in probably, if not two or more. I'll give a sub-example. If a product that is imported into South Africa needs to comply with certain requirements, there is a pre-market approval that is done. Pre-market approval will either be a type approval or an LOA issued. The very same with locally manufactured. It's not like it's only for import. So it is both ways. So if you've got an LOA, you can import and export as well. If you've got an approval, you can import and export because, as I indicated, to say our regulations or our technical requirements are harmonized, so which makes our certificates as well recognized in other countries as well. The confidence is probably built through the processes that we built in, through our approval systems, through our market surveillance, through our sanctioning processes. The biggest challenge that we have is people understanding the requirement and the perceptions behind that. For the mere fact that people don't see you doesn't necessarily mean that inspections are not conducted. But I think the critical thing is people seeing that the regulator is addressing the non-conformance in the industry by distracting those problems, those non-compliant products. I think that also is an element of building confidence into the industry. The second part is when these technical regulations or compulsory specifications are developed, they are not developed unilaterally. The industry, the consumers are part of the process which is also an attempt to build a confidence into the industry and the consumers in building. And I think also acceptance of our certificates by international organization as well, and us accepting their certificates, it builds confidence also on other suppliers and industry role players. I'll give you a simple example. One example, in NRCS, you take if one unit, which is food and associated industries, which deals with safety of foods that is imported, as an example, fish. If there is a supplier in South Africa that needs to export fish, that's fish inspected and it's given a health guarantee, which will also be presented to the receiving country, which is acceptable. The very same country, if it wants to import fish into South Africa, that certificate that they will issue, that authority, when they issue a certificate, it will also be accepted in South Africa. That will happen either regionally or internationally. But also, as an example, also in legal metrology, you've got South Africa being a member state with OML, which OML has got a certification system which South Africa is part thereof. So if a certificate is issued within that certification system, then we accept it, and they accept also our certificates in that. Just in a high level, although there are technical requirements, people need to be accredited and all those things. So there are those technical requirements where in legal metrology you need to be accredited, and also in foods they need to do a assessment and declare you as a safety technical signatory in that space. Our role in consumer safety is that NRCS has got a team of competent inspectors. We've got a team of competent researchers or developers of technical regs. So we develop compulsory specification, or what we call technical regulation, based on the products of South African national standard. So from that angle, we'll then develop a compulsory specification that a pre-market approval is done. Then we'll also do a market surveillance. During market surveillance, non-compliance or compliance of product will be established, either through also taking a sample to a testing facility that is also accredited by one of our technical infrastructure. So one of the requirements is if there's a testing facility, it needs to meet the accreditation system requirements of South Africa, which falls within the technical infrastructure, which is SANAS. Then once a sample is taken to that, if it's compliant, then we accept. If it's non-compliant, a sanction process will then be implemented to withdraw those products from market. Once they are withdrawn from market, they will then be distracted. The other process is once it's non-compliant, we'll either take the prosecution route, will submit to the NPA, go through the legal process in which we deal with them in that manner. We also conduct consumer education. We've got our competent team as well internally, our communication facility that will go and work with other departments and making sure that our consumers know. Because sometimes you can conduct market surveillance, but if a person that is buying is not knowledgeable of what they should be buying, you having a risk that you will always have a non-compliant product. There will always be a non-compliant product in market. So the way we're ensuring that the consumers are educated and the product is taken out of the market. Compulsory specification is a document in which a South African national standard is taken. Maybe we need to make it clear that a South African national standard is developed by SABS and it is voluntary by nature. Then we bring it home, we assess and we look at within the compulsory specification, which are the, depending as to what you want to regulate, either health, safety, which are the critical aspects within the standard that needs to be compulsory. Once that has been developed, then you develop a document called a compulsory specification from a national, then it becomes mandatory. In terms of a technical regulation is that the whole sense document that is voluntary is then taken and it's evaluated. If it meets all the regulatory requirements, a regulation is then given to the minister to adopt the national standard to become a regulation. So then we call it a technical regulation. And both of them, a VC and or compulsory specification and the technical regulation, they are adopted by a regulation through the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition. NRCS as a a regulator in South Africa has got a relationship with various regulatory organizations or associations. And in that space, each unit, depending on the mandate, each unit within legal metrology plays a role in that. And as an example, I'll take maybe legal metrology because I work within legal metrology. Legal metrology represents South Africa in OIML because South Africa is a member state in OIML. Their role is to develop what we call recommendations that can be used as a regulation across the world, and is in an effort to harmonize regulation. So South Africa playing a role in the development of regulation can then come home and adopt the very same recommendation at OIML. However, we are also a member state in AfriMets, which is African Metrology. We are also a member in SADC-MEL. We play a role as well. We play a lot of roles in also an attempt to harmonize the adopted regulations. At this particular moment, I can give you two examples. We've got two documents that are harmonized in SADC, and they're also harmonized in South Africa in line with the OIML recommendation. I'll give you a simple example, like your labeling requirements, which is R79, OIML R79. It's adopted in South Africa called SENS 289, South African National Standard 289, which is a technical regulation in the LM regulation. But we've got what we call SADC-MEL document 1, which is similar document. If you take all of them, they talk the same language. Even though in all these documents, they are completely harmonized, but there are also specific country requirements in them, but they are also indicated as well. And in other areas, you will notice that in the automotive, we use EU standards. In electrotech, we use IEC standards. So those are some of the roles that we play with. And the very same standards are applied regionally and internationally as well. The NRCS point of view in terms of agriculture or the specific industry, if you look at the requirements, the way they are developed, they cover all industries. They are not specific to industry, but they are applicable to all industries. They are very generic. However, if we bring it home in legal metrology, indeed, we've got certain agricultural products that are regulated. I will give you example, like your fruit and vegetables, they've got a manner in which they are regulated. Your dairy products, they've got a way in which they are regulated. Your oils, edible oils, I think we've got a way we regulate. How do we do that? If you look into our standard, we've got what we call prescribed quantities, meaning if you go to a supermarket and you buy, you will find certain quantities. It's not random quantities. You will either find a 500 ml, 1 liter, a 2 liter, and you don't have a 750 ml as an example. And it's because of the prescribed quantities. And I think when it comes to regulatory agricultural product, we've got those requirements. The other portion as well, when we want to bring it home in terms of importation and exportation as well, you've got we call it a quantity mark scheme. That falls within a legal metrology quantity mark scheme. We call it an E-mark. Those products that are imported into South Africa and they've got a E-mark, they need to register with the regulator to use the mark. Those that are produced also locally, we've got requirements that they must register with if they wish to have the mark in on the product, they must register with the regulator, and they will then be able to apply the mark and be issued with a certificate that is also recognized internationally as well. We have established there is a lot of labeling requirements in the country. And the reason I will say this is, as an example, if you go to Department of Health, they've got labeling requirements in so far as what should be on the label in terms of your ingredients. Whereas in legal metrology, the labeling that we're talking about is we're looking at specifically your product name, how it should be, who produces it, and more specifically, we are on to how do you declare your quantity. Declaration of quantity, that is our space and that is our mandate. And also the addresses, which I think to some extent Department of Health and I think Department of Agriculture addresses. However, the biggest challenge that we also found within the legal metrology in terms of marking is that when it comes to product naming, as an example, if you take milk, in certain legislation, they declare what is milk and they look at the composition. In legal metrology, we really don't look at that. If you declare it as milk, we accept it as milk. Thank you.
Thank you. That has brought us to our last presentation for today, and it's a very important presentation. As I said before, and as was highlighted in the video, the NRCS plays an extremely important role in consumer protection, the health and safety issues, specifically those issues that's mandatory under the technical regulations. Not only are the developers of such technical regulations, they are also enforcers thereof, and looking at all of these processes. I think more and more in the industry that you are in the essential oils, vegetable oils, we will start to see more and more demand of regulators getting involved, as currently in the voluntary section, where standards of social standards becomes quite more and more important internationally, farm labors, how that is being managed, looking after the environment, and all of those becomes quite important as well. I think over the next 2 days, you're gonna basically hear quite a lot of the experiences of the different farmers, the producers, both wild as well as the cultivated ones, dealing with a lot of the questions that's currently being raised as well in the boxes as well. So I would ask that you keep on sending those questions and listen to over the next 2 days of the real experiences, because I can't tell you, but they would be able to tell you of the experiences as they move through this process and successfully export into the international market. We've got a little surprise. It's not on the agenda, but over the past few months, we've been working on a video, a little video that deals with the essential oils, and we would like to play that for you. Thank you. Nora.
South Africa, home to 21,000 plant species, sporting many protected biomes and known for its unique flora and fynbos, is the third most biologically diverse country in the world. No wonder then that South Africa's essential and vegetable oils are in high demand in major economies like the United States of America, Europe, and the United Kingdom, with growing demand in Japan, Canada, South Korea, and on the African continent. Essential and vegetable oils are used by flavor and fragrance industries to create flavors for food and beverages, perfume compounds for cosmetics, household products, and fine fragrances, among many other applications. The time for South African producers to export has never been more favorable.
The global market for these oils is huge, and we're still lagging behind in meeting that demand.
Probably a decade ago, South African oils weren't very well known. They have become more well known overseas, and I think a lot of the buyers overseas now realize that our quality is just as good as anywhere else. Efficient, our prices are competitive. So I'm very positive about the export potential of South African oils, and that would be essential oils and vegetable oils as well. And I think we're fortunate to have quite a diverse flora in South Africa, where you can't find anywhere else in the world.
South Africa has the potential to become a major supplier of indigenous, essential and vegetable oils. The way to make this a reality is by ensuring compliance with standards and independent, internationally acceptable verifications of compliance. Currently, only a fraction of the world demand for essential and vegetable oils is produced in South Africa and exported to regional and international markets. With such high potential, what is preventing South African farmers from exploiting this opportunity?
We have faced quite a lot of challenges, and I think the key one has been the quality issues, understanding what quality the customer is asking for and ensuring that we are producing that right quality.
Consistency of production, consistency in quality of goods and compliance to standards and good agricultural practices are key requirements of the export market. Thus, careful control of all phases of cultivation, processing, storage, and transportation of the essential and vegetable oils value chain is crucial. To do this requires a good understanding of the supporting role of quality infrastructure through standards, metrology, accreditation, and conformity assessments such as testing, inspection, and certification. Soil preparation lays the basis for product quality, crop yield, and resource utilization. Soil sampling and analysis can therefore help to ensure that soil conditions are sufficient for crop and seed needs.
But you mustn't think that a lavender's a lavender, a geranium's a geranium. It is crucial that you understand that you're starting with the correct genetic plant material when you get into essential oils.
Then when you do a soil test analysis, you are able to see what the soil is able to do on its own and what you need to do in order to feed it to get optimum results.
We always advise farmers, first of all, what do you want to plant? And then they say, I want to plant this. And then I say, what type of soil do you have? They say, I have this type of soil. I say, well, I agree with you. I will come and then look at the seeds and see the variety that it's, whether it is compatible to that soil. But the soil, we must take it to be tested.
Compliance and monitoring of adherence to the required produce or quality management standards, best practice certification, and safety regulations are obviously important.
We primarily are involved in organic production, so we have to have organic certification. That's an annual process, an annual inspection that gets done by an independent certification agency. And in our case, we certify our product to both EU organic standards as well as the American National Organic Program.
Accredited testing and certification services provide the required confidence of compliance to the various standards and regulations. The timing and correct harvesting of essential and vegetable crops is paramount to the character, quality, and yield of its production.
We ensure that the quality of the harvest, firstly, we do training for our harvesters, so they know exactly what to look for. For instance, they know that they won't get like morula from a goat crawl or something because it smells. So that's how we ensure that the quality right from the beginning is correct.
Depending on the crop, the harvested materials should also be distilled as soon as possible after harvesting. In processing and subsequent storage, managing risks such as contamination and exposure to adverse conditions that may impact the quality of the oil produced would be important.
So we take all the factors in mind. So first of all, we look at the product when we start harvesting the product. You know, you don't want the product to stand still for a long time or get mold, things like that. So those are the things that you completely phase out. Then the next thing that you do is when it comes into your plant, you know, you want to process it as quick as possible. The vegetable oils is a little bit different than your essential oils. But with your vegetable oil, yes, the product can stand a bit longer. But on your plant material, you know, like your Lecrasium or your Artemisia afra, those things you want to put into your pot as quick as possible to process.
Once distilled or pressed, the oils need to be tested in readiness for selling. Testing of the oil quality plays an important role in the ultimate price that would be paid for the produce.
Having your oil tested is relatively simple and straightforward. You tell the lab what you want tested in compliance to your demand, and they test it. If you comply to the demand, the specification, then you're fine. If you don't comply, you can't sell.
More and more social standards with a focus on sustainable farming, the prevention of child labor, the reduction of global warming and other environmental and social protection matters are becoming a requirement for the export of essential and vegetable oils globally.
From Eucalypt Forest's point of view, we are very big on social impact in our area. And, we enjoy being able to tell our clients what we're doing. And it's something that we've always done.
Compliance to required standards facilitate the acceptance of essential and vegetable oils produced in South Africa for export.
The market does require certification. The rest of the world, I think they're going the certification route. They want products that are clean, products that are green, products that, you know, have a social story to it, you know, that benefit beyond us as the business, that benefit the bottom of the pyramid, as it were. And with, you know, the different certifications, the product or the prices, there's a certain premium that you attract, you know, above the standard selling price. The certified product itself pays for the certification. It's more for us to control the quality. But when a customer receives the oil, they will send it to an independent lab which has got some accreditation.
There is no doubt that standards, metrology, accreditation and competent testing, inspection and certification results play a major role in the crop yield and the quality of essential oils. Ensuring adherence to these required standards means people living abroad can also share in South Africa's rich biodiversity through its precious essential and vegetable oils, generating greater revenue for local producers and making the world a more fragrant, flavorful place for everyone.
Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed the video. It's basically a summary of what we have discussed and the presentations was about today. I see that we have a few questions in the question and answer section. If anybody else has some more questions, you can post it in there. We've got a few minutes to spare to deal with any of the questions. There are two questions at the moment. I think the first one is not necessarily a question. It was just address Henry. Monlopo, would you like to pose a question? Okay, I see Henry. There is a second question as well, and oh, sorry, it is also from Henry. He just asked if he can get the video. Okay, Elsie, would you like to respond to that question?
Thank you very much, Ron, and good afternoon to all the participants. It's Elsie Mankies. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor for the GQSP project in South Africa. We would like to really thank you for your participation this afternoon. The video and the presentation slides we will certainly share with you very shortly. The video will be made available through various platforms. And as soon as it's made available, we will make sure that everybody who has registered this afternoon and attended is notified to that. But please just give us a little bit of time because we're running a trilogy of webinars. And as soon as we are done with them all, we will package it and make sure that everybody receives the necessary materials. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much, Elsie. And just before we conclude, we would like to hear your opinion of this session. As I said, there are two more coming up, and we would like your feedback. So we will just post a quick poll, and would like you to respond to that poll, answer those questions for us, if you don't mind. And thereafter, we can we will conclude. Thank you. So you can do the same as you did before. Just click or answer it in the document itself. So, so far I've not seen anybody responding to the poll. Do you prefer not to respond to the poll, or do you just need more time to do so? You can just by raise of hands show me. Okay. Okay. It appears that there is a challenge with the poll at the moment, Nora. It appears that the polls disappear as soon as it's clicked. Nora, is there something that we need to do differently? Nora? There's some answers coming through now. Thank you. Okay, we have 22 people of the 29 people still present. We will give it just one more minute, and then we will, or 30 more seconds, then we will close the poll. Okay, so I would like to thank everybody. Would like to thank everybody for completing the poll. We really appreciate your feedback, and hopefully we would, as we move forward to the next 2 days, that more and more information will become available, and more lessons in this very important industry will be revealed, specifically from those who are actually experiencing this, who has gone through the difficulties. I think some of the questions we had, for instance, in the chat, relate specifically to costs of providing certain services or obtaining certain services, as well as some concerns that has been raised in terms of how do we promote the export, etc. So hopefully some of the questions will be answered by those who have gone through this process over the next 2 days. I would like to take this opportunity to really thank you for your time, and thank you for your effort. I know it's late afternoon in most of the countries. For those as well in the region and those listening internationally, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. I'll hand over to Dr. Elsie just for a final comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. So we come to the end of the first session of this trilogy of webinars. For those who had the staying power to stay on, I can't recall if Wim said in the beginning that this trilogy of webinars is as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year or the year before, 2019, you may recall that SAOPA had an annual conference, the first South African annual conference on essential and vegetable oils. And by popular demand, it was agreed that we would host a second conference in 2020. The COVID-19 the COVID-19 pandemic prevented that from happening. And in its stead, the SAOPA did a trilogy of webinars on making the most of the land, and I think many of you had attended that as well. So this series is basically because we could not have a face-to-face conference again, and instead of just leaving it and saying, oh, well, we'll wait, until that time that we get clearance again to have conferences face-to-face in the conventional way, that instead of waiting for that time to arrive, SAOPA thought it wise that we should actually run another trilogy of webinars, in this case, to exploit something that was identified at the end of the first conference, and that was to unpack the role of the quality infrastructure, the standards, accreditation, quality assurance, metrology, and how this quality infrastructure can support the industry in order to gain market access. So today was the first, and we hope that you found benefit in what has been explained. I see in the responses, there is an appetite for us to have more of these sessions to unpack the quality infrastructure system, and I'm sure we will take note of that. So just to whet your appetite a little bit for tomorrow, we're going to be hearing from the industry. And you should have received the program during the invitation. We sincerely trust that you would come and listen to the industry players. It's not going to be very technical. It's going to we're going to listen to the stories of how the journey of some of the producers, some of the buyers in this industry. So please do join us again tomorrow in order to listen to the industry speak, not us, to the industry. And then and the following day, we also have a nice program put together where a number of the people that allowed the pre-recording sessions to take place, they actually freely share of their knowledge, and they give some very nice advice to various, various parts of the value chain. So please do join us again tomorrow, and on Thursday. You might think that we're stretching this out a little bit, but the topics are very different. And we thought instead of just running a 1 day or a half-day session, it would be better to give people a little bit of time to digest what they've heard. So tomorrow, if there are any questions related to the quality infrastructure system, please, tomorrow we can still deal with them. It's not that the opportunity is lost. And afterwards, we can also entertain or help with additional questions that might be posed. So I think, Ron, with that, let me just thank the support team. I'd like to thank firstly Ron. Ron has been spearheading this assignment that we could put it all together for today. Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you for facilitating so well as well. Thank you to Wim, the Secretary of SAOPA, for his support as well. To Nora Dayanang, she's our backstop at HQ in Austria, Vienna, for assisting us in making sure that the videos or the pre-recordings run so smoothly. So thank you very much for all of that. Ron, do you have any closing statement you'd like to make? I'm just looking forward to seeing you all back again tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elsie. And yeah, the same. Hope that everybody will join us tomorrow and Thursday as well. I think that's going to be very exciting to learn from the people who has gone through that. So thank you very much for your time. And thank you very much, Elsie and Wim and the team behind this whole thing as well. Appreciate it. Thank you. Till tomorrow then.
Thank you and goodbye.